Hi, it's Chris from Epix again. One of the questions we get asked on a fairly regular basis is how to correct any mistakes that might have been made when recording a supplier invoice against a purchase order. Now usually this is because perhaps the supplier's invoice contained mistakes and a new one has been sent to correct that, or perhaps maybe a mistake was made by the person entering the invoice into the system. So this little video is all about how to fix that. So we'll begin by finding our purchase order. So if I go to find order, using the reference containing in this example, I'm going to find that order number. Of course we could use any of the search fields to get our purchase order. And then I'll click into that order. So as we can see, what we have here now is a purchase order that is at a status of fully invoiced. And that means that we've recorded the supplier invoice. Here we can see the invoice value and also the related invoice section here with all the details of what we recorded. You may have noticed as I scroll down this order that things don't look quite right. So visually here we can see that the invoiced value was more than what we ordered and received. There's some red numbers here to indicate an error. Likewise over here, the difference in the invoice that we were expecting versus the one that we recorded. And also down here on the invoice section, in the error column, it shows details of that error. So here we can see that we quite clearly recorded an invoice of more than what we ordered and what we delivered. So we'll need to correct that somehow. Now because this invoice has already been recorded, the correction would be to reverse that. So we were expecting a net value of £240 and what we got on our invoice from our supplier was a net value of £270, resulting in invoice payable of £300. So in order to get this one off there, we can do one of two things, and this really does depend on how your supplier sends you their replacement invoice. If they simply send you a credit note for the original and then a new invoice for the correct amount, then the best way of doing this would be to credit this one off this purchase order and re-record it all afresh. And in many ways that is actually the best way of doing it because it just makes the whole thing neater if you credit the original and then re-raise a new one. So if we begin by scrolling back up to the top here, we would then press record invoice. And as we can see, it doesn't know what to do with this because an invoice has already been recorded. So our gross value on this particular invoice that we want to correct and the VAT would go in here. But before we do, we would put in an invoice number and populate this information here. So what I would tend to do is I would tend to go with previously recorded invoices and stick a credit on the end of it. So we can see that we had an invoice reference of skip 001. So if I put skip 001 and reverse, say, leave those as they are because that's all fine by me. And in the gross section, if I put on there what we recorded previously, which was £300, in the VAT section that was £30, resulting in a net over here of 270. And we also recorded on our lines a £270 line, so I'm going to put that in there as well. Now what's very important to remember is that this is a credit, so in order to do a credit we need to make these numbers minus because we're taking this off what we've already recorded. So I'm going to put this as a -1. So what this will do is it will take a -1 of that quantity. So what I've done is I've put in a negative invoice header and I've put a negative line, and when I press continue the invoice will be recorded successfully, and if we scroll down here we can see now that there is no invoice remaining on this purchase order, because as we go down here we can see a second line in our invoices section which has now removed the original. So all that's left to do now is to re-record our invoice correctly. So we scroll back up to the top and press record invoice, and then I would probably put something along the lines of a skip and a corrected invoice, again putting our information in here as required. And what we're going to do here is we're going to just make sure that everything is correct. So if the goods value is £240, then our invoice should look like this, and we received one £240. So this all looks good. We would then press continue, And then back on our invoice here we can see that this matches up with what we ordered and delivered. And then finally here we can see the figures match, and also our invoice has now been recorded successfully. So when we export this transaction or these transactions out to our account system, we can choose whether we want to pass these to or not. I would suggest that because this is just a straightforward reversal, that you would probably just move this to a status that you don't care about anymore, and then you would simply just pass this one, so that this one goes into your financial account. So it's as easy as that. Any questions at all on that, or if you've got any specific examples you'd like to go over, then don't hesitate to give us a shout.